everyone, this is Mindy for Pretty Pink Posh, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing some ink blending with my stencils on Kraft Cardstock for a very unique look. So first I want to show you the supplies that I'll be using today. I have the Falling Branches stencil, then I have the Simple Sentiments stamp set, one of my favorites, Scallop Frames die set, and also the Spring Foliage die set. So I'm taking a piece of Kraft Cardstock that I have cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm just gently securing it down with some repositionable tape on my magnetic work surface. And then I'm placing the Falling Branches stencil over the top, and I'm going to hold the stencil down using the magnets on my work surface. Now the first thing I'm going to ink blend on is white pigment ink. You can use any type of white pigment ink that you have, and to apply that I am using a dome foam blending tool from Ranger, and I'm going to use that to apply this ink. So I'm really picking up that ink and putting on a good amount of that white ink. Now the thing with our white ink or our pigment ink is it does take longer to dry, and we do have to be a little careful that we don't get kind of goopy on the edges. So once I have that initial layer done with the white ink, I'm going to remove my cardstock and I'm going to clean off my stencil. I like to use rubbing alcohol that I have in a spray bottle and just wipe all that down and my work surface. And then to help speed up the drying process of my white ink, I like to use my heat tool. Then I'm going to take my cardstock, place it back down on my work surface, and line the stencil back up over the top. Now you could also slightly offset that stencil a little bit if you wanted to leave a highlight area. I'm taking, this is Lemongrass ink from Concord and Ninth. It is a foam pad and it's brand new, so it's super juicy. And I'm squishing that down on my glass work surface. The reason I'm doing that is because when I pick up this ink with a blending brush and apply it over the white pigment ink, my brush is going to pick up some of that white ink. So I don't want to go back to a good ink pad with white on my brush. I don't want to contaminate my ink pad. So by squishing it on a slick surface like this is really going to help. You'll notice it on your blending tools once you start blending on top of that pigment ink. So now I want to add a little bit of shadow to this. And this one, I squished down some avocado ink, so it's a darker color. And I'm going to come in once again with the brush right over the top, and I'm going to blend it, but not all the way to the end. I want to leave some of that lemongrass ink showing. Now, of course, you can use any type of ink pads that you have, any color of greens. It doesn't have to be the foam ink pad, and it doesn't have to be these particular colors. Any of your colors will work. So now when I remove my stencil, we have these amazing highlights left behind from that white pigment ink, and also because we used 2 shades of green. Now I'm going to add some splatters to this, so I have a couple drops of water on my work surface that I'm mixing with some white paint. I'm going to mix that together with my paintbrush and flick these white splatters onto the background, and I think this really just makes everything pop. Now once I do the white splatters, I'm going to just wipe off my paintbrush, and I'm going to add a couple drops of the water to some of that ink that I have smushed up at the top there. Now you can see I still have a little bit of white left in my paintbrush. That's okay. All it does is kind of tone down that green color a little bit. So I'm going to add flicks of this to the background. Now I am not usually one for Kraft Cardstock, but I am loving how this is turning out with that white ink as my base. Now while that's drying, I'm bringing out the Spring Foliage set, and I'm going to pick out a few of the small flowers, and I'm going to die cut them from white cardstock. It does also cut the centers, but I'm not going to be using the centers. I'm going to do something else with the center of my flower. For the sentiment, I have this one picked out from the Simple Sentiments stamp set, and I'm going to prep my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool and ink up my sentiment with the white pigment ink, which is one of my favorite ways to do white embossing. I'm just going to gently tap my ink pad onto the sentiment and stamp that down, not pushing real hard. I don't want to distort any of my letters. I'm going to stamp it one more time to make sure I have a good impression, and then I can sprinkle on some white embossing powder, tap off that excess, and I can come in with my heat tool and melt that embossing powder. Once I've let that cool down and wiped it down with a Swiffer cloth to remove any excess powder, I'm going to bring this over to my mini paper trimmer and trim this down into a thin strip. And I'm also going to trim off a couple extra pieces from this cardstock to layer behind my sentiment, just to help kind of give this more stability And I'm just going to use some liquid glue to do that and layer these together. Now, the last thing that I want to do to kind of build up my card design is I have this scallop frame that I die cut. This is the larger of the two on that set, and I'm layering it with some thin foam strips just to kind of give it a little bit of lift from the background. After I remove the backing, I'm going to try carefully line that up to have even margins going around my card front. So the card front is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Then I have my sentiment. I put some foam strips on one end and liquid glue on the other, and I'm putting it so it's overlapping the white frame. I think that really helps the sentiment stand out a little bit more by having that green cardstock overlap the white. Now for the flowers, I'm going to use thin foam squares. I like the thin because it didn't seem to pop up as much. I don't want it to be as high or as popped up as the frame. I want that to be just kind of set back a little bit more, but still add dimension to it. Now that that's all done, my finishing touch to this is going to be adding some jewels to the center of my flowers. And I have the lemon drop jewels that I like to just place in a triangle tray while I kind of sift through to pick out which size I want. Place them in the center and attach them using a jewel picker and some liquid glue. And that's going to finish off my card project for today. So I don't know about you, but I do not work on Kraft Cardstock enough, and I am really loving how this came out, and it was really quick to do, and it's really fun to use that white pigment ink as kind of your base color. I hope you enjoyed today's technique and card inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will have all of the supplies listed down below in the video description and over on my blog as well.